Welcome to episode 38 of the Going for Broke Outdoors podcast, a podcast by an outdoorsman for other outdoorsmen. I'm your host, Jeremy Gillespie. On today's podcast, I welcome Uncle Lou Butkovich to the show. Uncle Lou is the founder and the president of Stealth Outdoors, originators of stealth strips, cam buckle covers, smoke camo, and a whole lot more. In today's episode, Lou and I discuss the latest happenings at Stealth Outdoors. We recap some of Lou's Western adventures, Lou's first experience with leasing a hunting property this year, and plans for Stealth Outdoors moving forward. Uncle Lou is a great storyteller, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy this episode as much as I did. Before we get started, in this episode, Uncle Lou and I discuss a discount code to get 25% off smoke camo at Stealth Outdoors. After we recorded the podcast, Lou decided to make that discount site-wide with no coupon code required. So head on over to www.stealthoutdoors.com to check out the sale and to find some last-minute stocking stuffers for your favorite hunter. And now, on to the podcast. All right, today on the show, I'm joined by Uncle Lou. Uncle Lou, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Jeremy. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Glad to have you on. It's been a minute since we talked, so it'll be good to catch up. And never been on my podcast. I know you've been on some others, so be good to introduce people. I think a lot of people are going to know who you are, but for those that don't, give us a quick intro and who you are and what you do.
My name is Louis Butkovich, and I run Stealth Outdoors. We make stealth strips and a little bit of miscellaneous items, smoke camo. And I used to hunt. Now I just run my business.
So Lou, I think a lot of people, especially in the mobile community, are already using your products. I've been using your products. You'd have to check your order log, but I think I ordered my first stealth strips probably a decade ago, probably around 2013.
Do you still have them?
The only reason I don't is because I sold that set of sticks, and this is a true story. We didn't talk about this in advance, but I had a set of Lone Wolf, the original, 3-step single tube climbing sticks, and the holes on the steps were wearing out, but the stealth strips were fine. That's a true story.
I've talked to, we did get lucky. When you create a product, you never know how long it's going to last. If I were smart like Bill Gates, I would have figured out how to make it fall off your stand in like 3.5 years.
Yeah.
So you'd have to buy new, or we send the update out and redo your whatever, your license and all that. But no, we get a lot of positive feedback on its durability and its longevity, and so we've embraced that and we've run with it, right?
Yeah, great products, and I've used. I know when the buckles were first becoming a thing, I used inner tubes for a while, and there was all sorts of stuff going on with kayak, yak covers and whatever. But now you've got your own product, the buckle silencer. And I think that, one, it's a lot safer. The inner tubes, once or twice on me, they were so tight, they would push my strap release button. And that got a little sketchy once or twice. And the buckle silencer, that's got plenty of room. A lot easier to get your thumb in and out of there. So that's a great product too. So I've been using those since those came out. And, I don't know, just like your products. I like what you do. I've always had great customer service. So, and you've been a supporter of this podcast since it started. When I had no business having a sponsor at all, you were glad to help me out. So I appreciate that also.
Well, I loved what your premise was. You left Michigan, and I love Michigan, and you're from here. I moved here in 1990, and I love the state. But what your whole deal of what you were doing was going for broke. You were going to move to Montana and quit your job and try and hunt. And I don't think it quite worked out like that for you. You want me to pause in case you need to delete that?
No, that's fine. That was the plan. That was the plan. What happened is COVID happened probably right around the time that plan was going to take off. And that got real sketchy for a lot of reasons. So decided I should probably keep health insurance and the steady income. And then I bought a house, and that really put a damper on it. So here we are now.
It's hard. I get a lot of people, that like, hey, I want to do a YouTube thing, or I got a YouTube thing, and how do you do it? And it's like, well, it's hard. And you and I had some conversations in the early days. How are you going to monetize it?
Yeah.
And you remember one time I even suggested you take such great photography out west there. You're good with a camera, and you've got picturesque vistas out there, or views, whatever you want to call them. Didn't mean to act like I knew another language there, but I said, you should make a calendar. You remember that? That was one of our earlier conversations, but it's so tough to do it. And how do you monetize things?
Yeah, and it's tough to scale. I think with podcasts, especially like, I mean, it's great to have the support of so you and then Dan and Mario from Beast Gear. They sponsor the show as well. And but you're not making a living on that, and that's nothing against you or Beast Gear. It's just what the audience is and what people are willing to pay. Unless you're a meat eater or something, you're not living off advertisers. And
It's exactly. And I say that to a lot of people, like, unless you're Joe Rogan and you said meat eater, so potato,
sure,
you're not going to make it just on sponsors on a podcast. So how are you going to monetize it? And it's an interesting conversation.
yeah. So if you're starting a podcast or a hunting channel and you already don't have a huge name, you have to do it because you like it, because you like helping people, and there's not any money in it. I'm here to tell you, there's not any money in
They
it.
call that a labor of love.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I was in a previous business. So my background is I was a geologist a long time ago, and I got in the environmental business because when I graduated college in 1990, oil patch was kind of dead and the environmental stuff was firing up. So I my college ran a field camp program out in the South Dakota School of Mines. I'm from Illinois. I went to Eastern Illinois, and I met my wife out there. She was from Detroit. That's how I ended up in Michigan. I met a woman. I've said for years, we're still married today. You've been to the house. We're still here. Um, I moved here for a woman, but I stayed here for the weather. I love Michigan.
So we talked earlier about Stealth Outdoors and some of the things you're doing. I think people are probably most familiar with Stealth Strips. That's one of your main products, but you do have some other products, and looks like you're sporting one right now, which is your Stealth Camo. And you sent me a shirt earlier in the year and a jacket also, and I did try the jacket out so this fall. So is that something you're looking to do more of? And I'd like to know what's new at Stealth Outdoors as far as products. It's holidays. You got any sales going on or any updates you can share with us?
There's so much going on. You just threw about 4 questions in there. First, you said stealth camo, which is smoke camo.
Oh, geez.
That's okay. It's easy to tongue twist. So we did the smoke camo. Was that 2020? I think we did it during the pandemic.
Sounds
Fun
right.
project. I'm not a clothing designer, but it's fun to create things. I did it out of the name. I think I always tell people that you either you like a camo pattern that you look at. Everybody has their own preferences, right? And the hunting world needed another camo pattern about as much as Tom Brady needed another Super Bowl ring. But I stare at camo all day, and it just happened. So I made smoke camo, and this is it. And we have stuff on our website. And I might do, to jump to I think one of your later questions. I just emailed my web designer. I am thinking about doing a discount code for some smoke. We just have the shirts and the coats. Um, and I think they're high quality. I think they're well priced, but I'm still willing to do a discount because we have a little bit left. I kind of do clothing anymore as like limited runs because we're not a camo manufacturer. We're not a clothing manufacturer. Our bread and butter is the stealth strips. And now that you've talked about, is there a discount code? I think I'll just apply it to everything. When are you going to make this live?
This will probably go live in 2 days. So today is the 13th,
Okay.
so probably the 15th.
So we'll run it for a couple days because then we're up against Christmas. So for a Christmas special, I texted her, my web designer, coupon code going for broke. So your web channel. And if
All
you want
right.
to put that up afterwards, feel free. And we're going to do 25% off on the shirts and the fleece line coats. There's nothing quieter. Listen, if you don't buy it because you don't like the pattern, you aren't going to upset us because there's a lot of patterns I don't like. There's patterns I do like, but we'll do 25% off going for broke, and we'll just do it across the board for a couple. We'll trickle it into next week, and that's what we'll do.
Well, that's awesome. That's not something we talked about in advance. So appreciate that, Lou. And I've seen a lot of good feedback online with the smoke, especially for guys that are hunting like hardwood timbers, like beech trees, aspens and stuff with the grays, and especially from a tree stand. And I really like it for mid to later season when the foliage starts dropping off. It's a really good pattern.
We tried, and I know there's probably a lot to cover here, so I won't go too deep into it, but we tried to make an all-season, all-terrain pattern. And I tried not to make it ugly. Now, some people look at it and go, that's ugly. But some people, we get some, we obviously get good feedback from people that like it. You like what you like I said earlier. But I think it skylines as well as anything because we have kind of a gray base.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
I went turkey hunting in it this year. I really think there's not a lot of green, but I truly believe you do not need a lot of green. Green's to the human eye. But when the foliage is out, it's just like in a shadow. You don't need dark colors when you're in the shade, right? Things
Right.
just naturally get darker. With greens out, when the canopy is out, you don't need a lot of green. Green is naturally occurring. And when you put a green shield over this and there's some greens in it, I did it turkey hunting and I felt like they couldn't see me any better than if I was wearing an ASAT or a Predator or pick your camo. Sorry.
Sure. So, Lou, we talked about stealth outdoors. Let's shift gears here because this was interesting to me. I remember seeing a post on the Hunting Beast forum about it. This year, for the first time, you did a hunting lease, and a lot of guys on the Beast are diehard public land hunters. There's plenty of guys that hunt private land too, but I think there's less people that lease. So I'd like to know your experience. One, what prompted you to join a lease? How'd that go? And would you do it again? What'd you learn?
What prompted me to do the lease was I have a limited amount of time during our busy season is obviously hunting season, and I'm very involved in the business. I'm involved in day to day. So it was the lease was closer. I've been hunting the Huron National Forest, public forest up north for a couple decades. Um, and in the early 2000s, I did get access to a couple pieces of private property around me here, but I primarily hunted those two pieces that got overhunted horribly. And then I started hunting the national forest and public land around here. That's been my hunting. And I've got a lot of lack of success to prove that I public hunt because I'm not as good as like a Dan Infald or somebody that scouts you around. So this lease popped up. My neighbor was involved in this lease, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, him and his son. And so his nephew, George, and another guy, Russell, they are big buck killers. And you ought to see some of the stuff they've killed. And they primarily do leasing. Well, Russell got caught up on some bigger bucks, and George, who was in on the lease with him, he contacted my neighbor, my good friend Ron. He contacted his uncle, my neighbor and good friend Ron, and he said, "Hey, for $500, you guys want to get on Calhoun?" Now we're 10 miles from Jackson County. If you've ever heard anything about Michigan, we got a lot of complainers here. Love the state, love the people, but we complain about everything: the weather, right. You were here.
Yeah.
We don't have enough big bucks, but we have 190, 200-inch bucks every year getting shot, and they're mostly out of the southern tier counties, right?
Yeah.
So with lack of time and having to pick up their part of the lease for the end of the season for $500 a piece, for $1,000 to throw in, I spent more on a pair of boots. I have the same boots you do. So I'm like, how do I not spend $500 to have a chance at a giant when I haven't scouted? They've got all the cameras. So I'm in, right? I didn't get an opportunity. I wish I would have sent you some pictures so you could have put them on the screen. George, who's been on the lease for 8 years, he put on a clinic. And man, now you want to get into the learning a lot. I had some horrible shooting. I didn't see any big bucks. We got three deer. No, George shot 3, and Ronnie shot a kind of a scrubby buck, my neighbor. But George shot 2 good bucks. One probably wasn't up to his standards, but would have been my neighbor and mine's probably best ever. And then he shot a really good buck on the last evening, and then he shot a doe to top it off. I actually had the good fortune of it was along the St. Joe River in Calhoun County. I got a strap on. I was not the youngest, little George. He's a big guy. I call him Little George because his dad was Big George. He shot a buck across the river, and I volunteered to go across in waders. So I'm in chest waders getting across the St. Joe River. So I did get to drag a buck across the St. Joe River this year.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Which was really cool. And we got a little bit of pictures on that. But his first buck was just a solid 8-pointer. And then that was Wednesday, I believe, was the opener. Thursday, I missed a couple shots. Nothing else happened. Friday night, George shot a doe and then a really solid buck, probably a 130s. I wish I would have emailed you the pics. You could put them on the screen, but I got a tailgate pic of his stuff. Do you want me to try and text it, or don't bother with trying to get a pic up?
No, you can send them and I can edit them in after the fact.
Oh, I'll do that. I thought I'd send. I keep thinking we're live. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm so used to doing live podcasts. Okay. Great experience. Had a great time. Not that it matters, but another part of the reason I went towards the end there, George, who's about 10 years younger than me, and I'm 55, he lost one of his daughters this year, one of his twin daughters. And I just kind of wanted to go, spend some time with him.
Sure.
And he's a great hunter. And to watch how he picked apart the lease, the whole pressure thing, that's what we talk about on public land. And one sit and done. And it was kind of just the way we attacked the property, because I mentioned the St. Joe River, and it was along the river. But just the way we would sit around at night, and like there's only 5-6 stands, and it's only 115 acres. And then finally towards the end, they're like, okay, we need to go to the corner because they're all pushed down there. And then my neighbor Ron got an opportunity at a pretty good buck, and he didn't take it because he said by the time the deer flashed on him. But it was just interesting to watch people with cell cams, and they did put a food plot in it, even though it's ag. It was just interesting to watch how he dissected it. I don't know that I want to spend a bunch of time about what I learned from George, but I learned there's some strategy to private land too, right? It's not all just
Sure.
private land people don't know what they're doing. I mean, they do.
Yeah, it's not like the big bucks are just walking around in the open on the private land either. That it's still deer hunting.
Yeah, and he put in the most time, and he got the best results. Imagine that. Kind of like public land stuff. He who has the most knowledge and the most scouting in does the best, right?
Yeah, and that is a great area of the state. I'm borderline Rain Man when it comes to remembering things about big bucks. And I remember specifically, and this is probably, we could Google the article, but probably 2011, 2010, somewhere in there, a guy that was working with me at the time, his brother lived down by the St. Joe River, and he actually found 2 really big bucks. One of them, I'd have to go back and look at the article, but one of them was a non-typical, and it was probably 150-inch deer, and they got tangled up and ended up drowning in the St. Joe River. He was steelhead fishing, and he found them. So that is a good area of the state for big bucks.
You think the steelhead run that far up the St. Joe River into Calhoun County?
I don't know about that far. I don't know exactly where he was, but he was on the St. Joe River in the southwest part of the state.
Because we're southwest to almost central south, right there where we are, because we were 10 miles from Jackson County.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He was farther southwest for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it was fun. Now, what other questions you loaded like 4 questions in there, and I think I got to 2 of them. Did I get what you wanted?
Yeah, basically, would you learn and would you do it again? How was the lease experience? Let's say it sounds like maybe you got a deal this year. Let's say that lease was $1,000 or $1,500 next year. Would you do it again?
I wouldn't. I'm told that was a $5,000 lease. I was offered to go in there from gun season till the end. I can still go back there. It's late doe now, and my name's written on the lease, and I can go back there and try and fill a doe tag or 2. I need to go spend some time on the range. I've learned shooting is a perishable skill, and I'm just not spending enough time hunting anymore these days, and it's kind of sad. But would I do it again at that price? No. Would I do it again at what the opportunity that presented itself? Yes. I love to stretch my legs, so no, I wouldn't go run 100+ acres in Calhoun County for the year for $5,000. No.
Yeah, that
but
price.
That's just me.
And I know things are getting more competitive all the time, but that price surprises me. I talked to a farmer this year. I had a Kansas tag, but I hunted public land, but I ran into a guy that was working something on the ground. He must have been running it from either the state or whoever the owner was. Anyways, he told me that they were leasing for $15 an acre. So if you had 100 acres, you're looking at $1,500. So Michigan, $50 an acre. That's some big money.
I find it insane. That's what I always thought. $15 an acre. And these guys started leasing this place a few years. Well, I said 8 years ago. That's what George told me. And it was $4,000 back then. That's $40 an acre. And it's mostly ag. So out of the I think it was 115 acres, if I remember right. And you're really only leasing that river bottom.
That's the thing in Kansas too. That a lot of those properties, even if they're even if they're a whole section, 600 acres, it's so open there that you're basically leasing a couple tree lines or a creek bottom or something. And unless you get on a really premium property there, there's not much there. So your huntable acres, even on a section, you might be hunting 80 acres or something.
Exactly. And I just, for the price, no. I mean, I couldn't pass the opportunity. It was a timing issue. It was an opportunity. I jumped on it. Would I do it again? If I were going to spend $5,000, I'd go elk hunting. That's my true love. I would never spend $5,000 to go deer hunting.
Well, we're going to get into some of your Western trips. Before we do, if you don't mind talking about it more, you said you had some shooting issues, and that's a perishable skill. And I think that's something that's important. It's happened to me before several times. It'll probably happen again, where you have a good season or two where everything's going well, you're practicing, you're taking the time to shoot whatever your weapon is, your bow, your rifle, both, and then things get busy. You have a business that peaks during hunting season, and maybe you don't get the reps in that you'd like to, or now I know your daughter's in college, so maybe you're spending time with her, more often when you can. So with that said, maybe tell me what happened and what are you going to do in the future, hopefully, to prevent that from happening again.
Well, I that's a great question. First thing I need to do is get on the bench. I mean, and I got on the bench before I left, and I just bought a new gun this year. So after I got the lease, and we had lodging on top of that, no big deal. You got to stay somewhere, right? And then I started reading about that 360 buck hammer. Have you heard about that new round?
I've heard of it, but I don't know anyone that owns one.
I own one, so you know me.
All right.
And so I bought that just before gun season opened, like the end of October. I went into Guns Galore, which is a very popular store in Fenton, Michigan. They used to be the biggest gun dealer years ago in Michigan. And now there's so many gun dealers, they probably don't own that title. Maybe they do. So I walk in to get 3 boxes of shells. I have a scoped H&R single shot, that big heavy bull barrel. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
I got one of those, and it's always been a tack driver. And I shoot Hornady. I think they're 385 or 350 grain. I think they're 385 grain. They kick, per the box, they kick around 2,300. I've never chronoed it. And so I had that gun. So I go into Guns Galore and I said, hey, I need 3 boxes of the Hornadys if you have them in 2 3/4 inch. Yep. He lays them on the counter and he says, anything else? I said, hey, you got a 360 buck hammer? Because I was reading about it, the ballistics, and it's a down here, it's the straight walled rifle for down southern Michigan. Let me see. And he looked around and I'm thinking, oh shit, I didn't want to buy a gun. I just wanted to buy 3 boxes of shells. He goes, wait a minute, we got one in the back. He comes out with it and he opens the box and it's synthetic. It's not wood. I go, whew, I wanted a wood one. He goes, we haven't had a wood one. We've only had 3 of these and this is one of the 3. And if you want this gun, you better take it now. I said, I guess I'm buying a gun today. Yeah. So I pull out the credit card. So now I got to go sight it in. So I went and shot it a week or so before season, and it wasn't hitting right, but it just opened sights. I didn't have it scoped. So I got it hitting. I actually drove to the range on the way to go out there because I shot it, knew something was wrong. I didn't want to mess with it, pulled out the scope gun. It was hitting fine. We were talking about perishable shot, right? If you need to bring me back where I'm going on this tangent.
Yeah.
And so I stopped at the range at Island Lake Rec area. I drove there, got the 360 buck hammer, sighted in, dead on at 50 yards. My last shot was right and I'm like, I went out with confidence, but I don't know. I think it's almost like a golfer lifting his head to look for the ball before he hits the ball. I think I'm not following through. I think I'm pulling and looking for the shot. I think I'm pulling the gun. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't. And so I had horrible shooting I didn't take a shot on opening day. I saw some deer, but nothing that I wasn't in, and I had to make a move. And then the next day I was into deer. And the first shot was kind of far. It was a walking buck, looked like a good rack. It was across the river, and I slung one at about 120 yards with open sights. And you're like, okay, I marked that. I checked it. No hair, no blood. I spent a lot of time over there, messed up over that area. Another one came in, broadside it, hate to admit it, 80 yards, missed that one. And later that night, I set that gun aside, pulled out the 12 gauge slug gun, and I'm facing across the river. They're still moving over there, even after all that mess I did in there earlier in the day. And behind me, a doe came in about 15 yards. I'm like, gosh dang it. And I got my back to her, but I sense it coming in, and I'm buried in a deadfall. I'm not even in a blind. I'm right on the river in a deadfall. And I look over and there's 3-4 deer, and the ones behind me about 10-15 yards. I'm like, well, I'm going to get busted. And these I won't have to put the waders on for. So I looked, and there was one behind me, and I put the scope on her at 45 yards. I don't know how you missed that shot. I mean, I basically right now, I got to get on the bench. I got to rebuild this. I don't even want to go deer hunting right now. I've never shot so poorly in my life. Everything up in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, I rarely had a miss, and everything I shot at fell down within 10, 20 yards. I mean, and I forced a lot of shots, and it served me well. You know, I've shot a lot of deer, not a lot of big deer, but I've shot a lot of deer. I don't know what's going on, Jeremy. I do not know what's going on. I'm not going to sit here and cry a river and go on the beast tonight and go, oh, what do I do? You know, you got to figure this crap out yourself, you know?
Yeah. Well, a lot of that stuff is, like I said, time, muscle memory. It sounds like you had a new gun with maybe not as many rounds through it as you would like to.
It could be these things. I didn't used to wear these things.
That's a real issue too. I noticed in the last year or two, I've worn glasses. I probably started when I was like 18, 20. So my eyes were like borderline, and the last year or two, boy, I've really noticed a difference. So,
I mean, these are just cheaters. They're on me all the time. I don't need them for the podcast. I get on them anymore. And I used to fear that they were, but I don't want to get into eyesight issues. It could be that. It could be just not shooting enough, and it's form. I think it's a form issue. I think I'm looking for the ball. I I hate to call it flinching, but I think I'm pulling a gun up. I'm going to fix it. Now that I have a problem, I am going to focus on trying to fix it. How I'm going to fix it? One, I got to sit on the bench, make sure the guns are right. They were right before I left. Make sure something didn't get hit off. And then I just need to shoot more.
Yeah. Any plans to scope the buck hammer or no?
Yeah, there's plans. I do like the idea of having, like with my muzzle loaders, and down here in the South, you know, the southern zone of Michigan, because we're 3 zones.
Yep.
Upper Peninsula is zone 1, northern lower is zone 2, and we're zone 3. In this zone, the last few years, I don't know how many it's been, but it's been the last few years, muzzle loading is open to all legal firearms. So I was shooting, I mean, essentially, it's not a month, but you get 10 days of muzzle loader, and you get 15 days of the regular gun season, and it's all legal firearms. So it's not even a muzzle loading season down here. But what I was getting at is, I remember where I was going and came back. I have 2 muzzle loaders, one's scoped and one's not scoped. I like having open sights because my game for years, not on the lease, but my game for years has been walking around and jump shooting deer. And I've shot a lot of deer that way. And I've shot deer with open sights to 130, 135 yards. And so I like the buck hammer. It had like almost like Williams fire sights on it. It's a Henry. It's a Henry lever gun. And it's got like those fiber optic pins, you know. Yep. I don't know that I need to do this for you, but
yeah.
So after my embarrassing trip to the lease, you know where I'm at here in Holly, Michigan. So I went up to one of the public pieces the next weekend, and Saturday, not this Saturday, a week ago Saturday, I'm walking around in a public piece, had to do a little shipping on Saturday morning. I got up there about 9:30, took a couple mile loop. And I know that's not a lot of miles, but when you walk the way I do, it's very slow and quiet. And a lot of times I'll jump things. And sometimes I'm so slow and quiet that things will stand up and look at you. And that's when I shoot a lot of deer. I don't shoot them all running, but I've shot a lot of running deer. So at the end of it, I kind of let off your guard. And I tell people all the time, if you aren't completely exhausted from trying to walk quietly, you aren't trying hard enough. It takes a lot of effort to walk quiet. Now, we had a nice rain the night before, or I think maybe the snow finally melted off, but it was just quiet. And I was walking around and I was finding some sign, but I never jumped a deer. And as I'm coming out, I let my guard down. I'm like, all right, I'm going to the truck. And something took off running. And when I picked it up at about 40, 50 yards, it was a coyote. And I dropped that son of a gun on the first shot with that buck hammer with open sights. That's why I like open sights. And I'm like, oh, I'm back. I still have it. Then I went out last Sunday and embarrassed myself and missed twice more. But I shot a running coyote a week ago Saturday.
I want to take a minute to mention huntingbeastgear.com. Co-founded by the big buck serial killer himself, Dan Infalt, Hunting Beast Gear features state-of-the-art manufacturing techniques, the highest quality materials, and innovative designs that have been engineered, field-tested, and refined to perfection by a group of the best mobile hunters on the planet. www.huntingbeastgear.com delivers cutting-edge products, including beast gear climbing sticks with weight reduction holes designed to deliver incredible durability in a lightweight stick. Beast Gear climbing sticks also feature non-staggered inline stacking and double steps, all in a 2.2-pound package, including the fastening strap. HuntingBeastGear.com has also released the game-changing Beast Gear Hang-On Tree Stand. Designed to be the ultimate hang-on tree stand solution, with over 4 years of prototyping, testing, and refinement, the Beast Gear stand features a 16-inch wide by 29-inch long platform. The stand comes in at an incredible 6.8 pounds, and it does all that without compromising strength or durability. The Beast Gear stand is finished with a long-lasting anodized coating and features grade 8 hardware, high-quality Delrin washers, beast buttons, and adjustment knobs. For more details and to place your order today, head on over to www.huntingbeastgear.com. Now, back to the podcast. Yeah, for that style of hunting, I mean, open sights are nice. I know a lot of guys now that shoot like the, they call them, what is it? I'm going to mess it up. LPVO, low power variable optic, which is basically the type of scope you'd put on an AR where it's like a 1-to-4 power or 1-to-6 power. So something like that for your style of shooting, that might be good. Or guys I know will run like a 2-to-7, which is real common for a muzzleloader. But then there's these little red dots you can mount on top of the scope. So if you like the open sight feel, then instead of looking through the scope on something like where you'd be jump shooting, you have that little micro red dot on there and you just get the red dot on them, and, as opposed to the scope. So maybe some options to consider.
But are you saying that the red dot's on top of the scope?
Yes, it mounts on a separate mount on top. So you wouldn't look through it, through the scope.
Okay. So you got to pick your head up to see, and that's what I don't like about over-unders. I had a buddy one time that saw a porcupine in a tree, and he had his 30-06. And I looked at him, I go, dude, your scope covers are down, not rings. Your scope covers are down.
Yeah.
And he shoots and he hits it and he goes, I got an over-under. Well, to me, that's not natural, because you should get your cheek on that thing and get sight down that barrel or sight down your scope, wherever you're comfortable with. And I don't like the idea of picking your head up or laying your head down. I want to just sight plane right down that thing. And so I think I'd struggle with that, but I got to figure something out, because the last few years, my shooting has gone downhill.
Well, reps are your friend, Lou. Reps are your friend.
I'm going to work on it. I got, it's bad enough. I went to, oh gosh, don't say crossbow. I went to the crossbow years ago because I really wasn't that good of an archer, but with gun, that's where I probably killed the majority of my animals. But hey, you know what? Maybe being open and honest about it, and going public with it, it'll force me to fix it. But I thought I was fixed when I hit that running coyote. But hell, maybe I got lucky.
Yeah, I had a bad year, but instead of with a gun, with my bow, I missed. And it's funny to even talk about, because I end up shooting an antelope with my bow. That was a 60-yard shot. Antelope, a buck antelope is smaller than a white-tailed doe, so pretty small target at 60 yards. In Montana, there's no a red fox isn't a fur bearer, and I've always wanted a fox mount. I think they're cool. So I shot a red fox, and it was a young one, so it was pretty small at 30 yards with my bow, no problem. And then I missed several elk. 2 or 3 of those weren't exactly my fault, because they moved, jumped the string, or turned, or there were some issues going on there. But at least 1 or 2 of them was my fault, and it's same thing. I lost a lot of confidence. I actually hold on here 1 second. I'm gonna do a review on this. I got a new rangefinder, because I was I got a Leopold RX5 full draw. So one of the things, and I knew this going into the season, so these are post-season lessons learned for me. One, religiously every year for the last 8 to 10 years since I've had an electronic laser rangefinder, I always put a new battery in it. That's part of my preseason plan. I'd been shooting in my yard, and my rangefinder had been working fine, so I didn't change the battery this year. So shame on me there. And I'm not saying this happened for sure, but I swear about halfway through the elk season, the battery must have been right on the edge of being dead. And I use lithium batteries in those because they last longer, and anybody that runs lithium in their cameras know they usually work right up till a point, and then they don't. It's not like a alkaline battery where it kind of dies off slowly over time. You can see it getting weaker. It's like the voltage just drops right off. So I was starting to get some real erratic readings. And one of the things that I don't like about the rangefinder I have right now is it never did well in taller grass. And I hunt off the ground a lot out here, spot and stalk. So I would be ranging, and in antelope season, I had the same issue. I ranged an antelope and several different times, and I even put it on the scan mode where you can hold the button down and it'll give you like real-time feedback. And I was on this antelope and I kept getting like 50 yards and 80 yards. So that's a huge difference with the bow, right? I can shoot 50
Yeah.
yards. I can't shoot 80 yards. So I shot for 50 yards and I was 30 yards short, right? So, and it's kind of funny. I've talked about this on another podcast too. One of the big things for me out west, and I've had some guests that have talked about it too. I think Jacob's Cleaner, when he was on, was talking about how hard it is to judge distance when you don't have a forest, where you don't have a tree of a certain size that you're used to, or even scrub brush or anything. It's just sage flats. I have a real hard time with it. So, long story short, that's why I ended up with a new rangefinder.
I should probably consider that. As much as I like binoculars and stuff, I hate to call myself a minimalist, but when I go hunting, I don't take a lot of things. If it doesn't fit in a pocket, on an all-day hunt, I'll take a small pack. When I'm sitting in a blind, like I was on the lease, I'll take a small pack. But I'm mostly a pockets guy, and a bottle of water's got to go somewhere for all day. So I just don't carry a lot of things. So I'd love to say I'm going to get a rangefinder, but I don't think my rangefinders were my problem with the gun, because it doesn't really matter if it's 50 or 80 with a gun, or if it's 100 or 120, right? I mean, it should be similar. You should be only a couple inches off with something kicking 2,300 feet per second. You know, I'm not talking high power rifles. I'm talking the Southern Zone stuff, my 12 gauge and that 360 Buckhammer.
Sure.
So I think it's a form issue. I think it's a follow through issue. It could be the eyes. We're going to figure it out. You know,
Yeah, it's the follow through. That's a real interesting point too, because I had some issues. So when I first started bow hunting, I did great. I killed like the first 10 or 11 deer that I shot at. Everything was going great. I thought I had it all figured out. And then within the span of 2 or 3 years, I wounded 2 or 3 deer. And I started figuring out, and it was crazy to me at the time, because some of these deer I wounded were like inside of 15 yards. How do you miss that, right? Chip shots. And that's exactly what it was, is I wasn't following through. And what I figured out is, you had your sights up earlier. I'll get my bow out. So what I was doing is, I'm a right-handed shooter, so my left arm is my bow arm. And as soon as I shot, I was moving my bow arm to the left, and I was hitting these deer consistently on the ones that I was wounding to the left. And I started figuring out like, oh, I'm rushing to see what's going on instead of watching the arrow flight through my pin guard and watching the impact. I want to see it, and
yeah.
that was
And you're
killing me.
moving
So
the stuff out of the way, right?
yeah. So now
You're lifting your head to find the golf ball.
I've got a super, super simple thing that I say to myself all the time now. It's aim, breathe, and follow through. Every time I see an animal I want to shoot, that's the three things I just repeat to myself over and over and over. Aim at a spot, pick a spot, don't forget to breathe, and then follow through. Just watch the arrow through the pins. Don't try to jerk the bow out of the way. And when I do that, when I execute, I don't usually have any issues.
I've struggled with archery for years, and I always thought it was form. The first couple of bows that I bought in Michigan, I moved to Michigan in 1990, and I had a bow that a neighbor gave me, and I killed a deer with it in Illinois my senior year in college. And I moved up here, and I'm like, it was maybe a 40-pound draw. I think it was a grizzly blacktail. I've shown it to people before. I still have it in the basement. And that arrow, like I hit a buck fawn, my first deer, and I mean the thing actually, when it landed in the deer, it was almost like the arrow was almost straight up and down. Did I have any business shooting 40 yards back then? I didn't know any better, but I hit it and I killed it. So then I moved up to Michigan, and I'm like, I need a bow. Guy set me up with a bow too long, or I bought a bow too long. Second bow I bought it from a reputable shop that's no longer in Lansing, Anderson Archery, and they bought me a bow too long. And so I never was set up properly, and I didn't have any mentors back then. I just picked this stuff up and started hunting because I wanted to hunt. And archery I've always struggled. And now even so, I went to a traditional bow about 2018 or 19. I bought a longbow. Now I hunt primarily with a crossbow, but I bought this because I'm intrigued by it. And sometimes I'll be complaining to a buddy, and they'll say, well, shoot the bow. And I shoot the bow at 20 yards, which is just pulling it out of the garage after you haven't shot it in 2-3 weeks, and hitting 2 bullseyes in a row. They go, well, nothing wrong with your shooting. I'm like, there is. You just saw my 2 best shots of the year.
Right.
And I just felt it was form. But sometimes when I follow through, even with that longbow, when I watch that arrow go right into that bullseye, you just feel it. And it's like, how can I not reproduce that? And it's form issues. And I now think I've got this, and I solved that by hunting with the crossbow. Solved all. I don't give a crap what anybody thinks about crossbow. They're legal in Michigan. I've killed deer cleanly with them. Whatever. But now I think I've taken that old archery form problem into gun. I don't know how do you mess with a scope 12 gauge slug gun that's on a deer at 45 yards? I mean, you'd hit that with your bow.
Yeah, maybe not this year, but usually, yeah. But
I
yeah,
think I've been talking too long about how crappy of a shot I am. Hopefully, you edit some of this out, but I don't care either way.
yeah. Well, I think it's an important discussion, right? And it's a real world discussion. And I think the biggest takeaway for me, and it sounds like for you too, is you got to do something in the off season to get the confidence back,
Yeah.
whatever that is. Whether it's buying a new rangefinder, for me, it's going to be a lot more reps too. But the reason I bought that specific rangefinder, and that's something I didn't really talk about there, is that's got something called the last target feature, and my current rangefinder doesn't have that. And basically, what it does is the software and the rangefinder will return the farthest object that the laser is hitting. So if it's hitting 10 blades of grass before it's hitting the animal, it'll rule those out and it'll return the farthest thing. Now I haven't got a chance to test it, but the reviews have been pretty good. So I'm excited to get that out in the field and put that through the paces in some real world scenarios before hunting season. And hopefully that'll give me confidence that when I range something, the distance that I'm going to actually shoot is the distance on the rangefinder, because that was not the case several times this year. And boy, that'll, you as a bow hunter, at least I do, you rely on that so much to choose the right pin, to shoot the right distance. And when it's wrong, it really messed with my mind this year.
And what I was going to say earlier, I went on that minimalist and whatever tangent I went on about shooting again, but I want to get a rangefinder. I was too stubborn for years. It's like GPS. I think GPS will make your woodsmanship skills go down, kind of like speed dial made you forget all the phone numbers that you used to remember.
Sure.
I think that rangefinder, I resisted it for years, and I would just, it's easy to pick an object that's about 10 yards. And when you're sitting there hunting, I would guess and estimate. And sometimes even people I was hunting with, we would guess, like, how far is that? And then, sometimes we'd pace it off because we're hunting out west. How far is that tree right there? And we're not just out there screwing around, but but you're keeping your mind sharp by trying to guess yardage. And I'd love to get a rangefinder. I just fear it'd be like the binoculars, and I wouldn't take it because that's where I started on that tangent, that I'm too much of a minimalist. I don't want one more thing on me.
Yeah. And I know you tuned into the show last night. So for people that don't know, I'm also hosting Dan Infalt's live show, the Beast Report, on his channel. And last night we had Chris Leopard on from Mobile Hunters Expo, and he talked about shooting IBO. And he doesn't do it anymore, but that's something I might think about this year. And IBO is kind of cool. That's International Bow Hunting Organization or something, I think is what IBO stands for. But they do a lot of unknown distance targets, and it's targets of various sizes. So it's real applicable to hunting scenario. And that might be something that I practice. Even if I don't shoot IBO this year, I might take my target out, toss the target out, pace off something, turn around, shoot it, because that's something that I've noticed I've definitely struggled with, especially in the plains type environment where there aren't, there isn't a pine tree every 10 or 15 or 20 yards. It's real hard to get a frame of reference for me.
If you don't do IBO, you should consider maybe the TAC, the Total Archery Challenge. Are you familiar with those?
I am.
They go out west.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know they have shorter courses. A lot of times I'm joking, of course, but I feel like TAC is a conspiracy from the arrow manufacturers, because you see all these targets that are right next to trees with 1,000 arrows in them at the end of the weekend. And I have a hard time justifying when a carbon arrow now is $15, and then you got a, broadhead. And if you're shooting lighted nocks, it's like, I don't want to shoot $30 into a tree 10 times over a weekend.
Yeah. No, I get it, but I think Chris also mentioned that last night about the TAC shoots. It was part of that conversation. And I've been to some of the TAC events here in Michigan, a couple of them, just as a vendor or visiting vendor booths. I've never shot it because right now I can't shoot a damn gun 100 yards. I'm not shooting a bow 100 yards. And I would never shoot a crossbow at an animal over 40. I did it one time over 40. And now that was with a crossbow. that it was my first crossbow back in 2009. And I think when I chronoed that crossbow, it went a whopping 246 feet per second. So when people talk about crossbow people are a cheater, I'm like, most of the people calling me a cheater are shooting 300 feet per second plus, right? And even with my new Parker crossbow that's discontinued, right? I think I spent $500. So I always get a kick out of these people shooting $2,000-3,000 pieces of equipment, calling me the cheater or lazy. It kind of grinds my craw. I need to get over it, but whatever.
Yeah, like you
There I
said,
said it again.
it's like you said, it's legal in Michigan, and I won't knock anyone that's taking advantage of things that are legal. I mean, I think part of the reason, I think, this is just my opinion, why crossbows get a bad rap is because people do take longer shots, and I'm not calling the kettle black here, because I took some 50-60 yard shots at elk this year, shot 60 yards at an antelope. That's my max range. That's as far as I'll shoot, is 60 yards. But if you're sighting your Raven crossbow in, or your 10-point, your $2,000-3,000 crossbow, and you're shooting targets at 80 yards, yeah, you can pound them in there, but the targets don't move. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Even if you're shooting 300 or 400 feet per second, you're still significantly slower than the speed of sound. And I think that's where crossbows get a bad rap, is people taking those real long shots and thinking because it's accurate to that range. It's not a gun, right? It doesn't shoot 2,500 or 3,200 feet per second. It shoots 300-400. And I mean, whether it's a conventional bow, a recurve, or a crossbow, the longer your shot is, the more likely are to have issues. It's just a fact.
Out west, things are different. They shoot, guys out west shoot guns farther. Obviously, bow ranges are farther. I'm never going to tell you that you shouldn't shoot your bow 50-60 yards. Your own range is your own range. You should know what your range is. My range with my crossbow, I freehand, I creep through the woods. I'm not sitting on a food plot with a shooting rail. I was just on a lease with a gun and I sucked with it, but we already covered that. But with a crossbow, when I'm hunting, I'm kind of still hunting. A lot of people don't do that in archery season, and I really enjoy it. But I'm shooting. A lot of times I'm walking up on or when I'm still hunting the still part and they walk up on me, I'm shooting 20-30 yards. That's my range. Will I shoot 40? Yeah, I shot 46 yards once, and it ended okay. I found the buck, but that buck had spun from broadside to running away while that arrow was in the air, and that was my 246 feet per second, and it went right next to his sphincter, I can say that, right?
Yeah.
And it blew through his guts and it heart punched him. So when I finally gutted that animal, the broadhead was indented into the heart. So imagine all that, and then it, boom, heart punched him. So it knocked him down, knocked him silly. I ended up walking him down because I could tell he was hurt, and finished him off. He couldn't escape. He was so, imagine getting punched in the heart with a broadhead, but the broadhead never really broke the skin. It just had an indention. So
That's
that
crazy.
would hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I went, all right, I'm not shooting 46 yards, because you just see what it did.
Yeah.
It just turned, what is that, 90 degrees? Boom. I'm like, wow. So when I hear people talk about shooting 1,800 yards with, I don't care if it's a $2,000-3,000 crossbow or not. That's for targets, in my opinion. But there's probably guys out there that have killed them at 1,800 yards. But there's guys shoot bows 1,800 yards.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And the guys typically, again, I don't want to get off in like hypothetical situations here, but it's kind of like gamblers. I feel like you only hear when things are going well.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't hear when things are going bad.
You don't hear about the losing. You always hear of their winnings.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a good point. That's a good point.
Well, earlier, Lou, you mentioned if you were going to spend $5,000 on a lease, you wouldn't. You'd rather go on an elk hunt. I know you've been on a couple Western trips, so talk about that. I think a lot of people are interested in going on their first Western hunt. Some of the stuff I've talked about. What'd you do? How'd you prepare? Talk about maybe getting the tag. Where'd you stay? What'd you learn on those first trip or two?
I've been to Colorado 2-3 times. I've been to Nebraska once, Western Nebraska on a mule deer hunt once. I've been to Idaho on an elk hunt, Wyoming on an elk hunt, and Idaho on a mountain lion hunt. That is the extent of my Western experience. They were all memorable and fun hunts. In '94, my cousin got married outside Denver, actually in Boulder, And we went to the Maroon Bells with them, met up with them. We took vacation. We met up with them on their honeymoon after the wedding. And I'm like, I want to come out here and go hunting. And I was just getting into gun hunting. So I bought a rifle and I went out there. And my first 2 years out there, I think, were 96, 97. Knew nothing. Some people might even say you still don't know anything. But I mean, I knew less than nothing back then, but I wasn't afraid to go. I felt confident in my orientation skills, being a geologist. I knew how to read a map. My wife and I went out there, stayed with friends in Elgibel or Carbondale, right in that area, down valley from Aspen, Snowmass. And I just walked around the mountains with a gun. And I didn't learn a lot on those 2 trips other than I'm not afraid. And so people say all the time, what do you need? Well, you need a compass, and you need to be aware of it. The best way to not get lost is to stay found, right?
Yeah.
Don't get lost. So you want to be safe. You want to find elk, and you ain't hunting elk until you find elk. So be safe, find elk, hunt elk. And so we didn't get to execute that plan until 2000. I teamed up with my cousin Louie out of Minnesota. We went to Wyoming. I had a cousin in Lander, Wyoming. And on that trip, I was starting to dump some deer around here during mostly gun season, but I might have actually had another archery kill under my belt. But I grew up reading Field and Stream, and I didn't grow up in a hunting family. So I was basically a self-taught do-it-yourselfer. And so when people say, well, what do you need? What you need the desire to go out west. And the younger you are, go do it. What's the worst you can eat is a tag. Colorado, my first 2 tags are $250. So then we graduate to Wyoming in the year 2000. Me and my cousin Louie went, and we're pounding around the woods. Oh yeah, there's a bunch of elk out there. We're on the backside of the Wind River Range from Lander, Wyoming. And we weren't seeing crap. And one night it was pretty warm. It was September 20th. We had cow-calf tags. And we decided that we're just going to kind of set on this. We found a meadow that we really liked. And it was kind of an L-shaped meadow. And I was looking this way and he was looking that way. And this elk comes running by and it's going to go right towards Louie. And I'm like, I wonder why he's not going to shoot. So I thought, okay, I cut one loose. He jumped up. I missed it because, well, I missed it. He jumped up and he had a 280 and 280 bolt action. And he shot 4 times. And I think he hit that thing on a dead run 3 out of the 4.
Wow.
And he taught me back then, if I can teach anybody one thing, and I can't teach a lot about hunting, he said a couple things. Don't stop shooting. His neighbor, Kenny Merton, taught him how to elk hunt. He said, don't stop shooting until they're on the ground. That was one thing. And the other thing, I'm like, cuz you did pretty good, because he emptied his gun and it was still getting woozy and it was standing there with its calf. And I actually put a finisher in the neck and we counted all the bullets. And that's why I figured he hit it 3 out of 4, or I might've hit it the first one, but I said, cuz that's your elk. But the other thing is, when you're shooting through a scoped rifle or a scoped gun, if you leave both eyes open, if you can train yourself to leave both eyes open, your target acquisition is so much better. You're on that animal immediately, aren't you?
Yeah.
And I came home from that trip and bought a pellet gun with a scope, and I spent the summer in the backyard training myself to shoot with both eyes open. And it's just amazing for target acquisition with a scoped rifle or any type of scoped gun. And that's about all I got. And then on that was Wyoming. That was a huge cow elk. It was bear getting out of there, and it started snowing on us. People in Michigan, I'm gonna take one more shot at Michigan before I got to get this in. Everybody in Michigan, and really everywhere you go, everybody's so proud of their weather, right? Oh, our weather, just wait 15 minutes, it'll change. And I always say, you never been out west, have you? Because we went from t-shirts when that elk was killed to a blizzard when we got out, and the next morning there were 6-foot drifts. You don't get 6-foot drifts in southern Michigan. You aren't waiting 15 minutes and weather changing like out west in the mountains.
Yeah, the mountains are something else, and that's a good takeaway. While we're talking out west, I've had friends come out and they're like, well, what's the weather going to be like? I'm like 20 to 200 or anywhere in between. Yeah, I mean, in September especially. September is kind of like late October, early November in Michigan. Who knows what you're going to get in the mountains? Like it's pretty, I don't know. It can change real quick.
On weather, I'll skip over my Idaho. I finally got an elk in Idaho in 2006. In 2012, I did a mountain lion wolf hunt. Really cool. Didn't get one. And then in 2018, just before my 50th birthday, I drew a muzzleloader tag in Colorado. And a friend of my little brother's had a ranch out there. So he put me up. And he bordered the, I forget what the public land was, but I missed an elk out there with my muzzle loader 20 minutes into that trip and never got a chance to redeem myself. But the weather is what we were talking about. So when I went out there, we were getting into the, it's when was that? It was muzzleloader. I think it's September sometime. And in the mountains, it really cools off at night, but it
Oh
was
yeah.
mostly in the 30s. And the last day I was there was a neighbor to my little brother's friend that said, if you don't have an elk down in a couple of days, he was a neighbor. He said, come visit me and I'll give you some tips. And he said, and so where I was going in from the ranch, I was driving in his switchbacks and then getting into the public. This guy lived down the road this way. And he said, you just go a quarter mile down the road. There's a campground there and you go down that trail. And it was in a big valley. And he said, you walk that a mile or two and get away from any other hunter, which there was no hunters in that this morning. He said, you should see elk. And when I came out, there were some people at the campgrounds there and they started mentioning landmarks. And I went 6 miles that last day, in and out. So 12 miles in the damn mountains. I was mostly running a trail, but there was still some up and down. And when I got back to my truck to drive back a quarter mile to where I was staying, it was 96 degrees on the last day. So we went from 30s of a high to 96 degrees. That's the way. You don't get that in Michigan.
Yeah. That's exactly the weather that we had for opening weekend of archery elk here. I had a reservation. So in Montana, there's private lands where people enroll them for public hunting. So it's private land, but during the season, then there's two types. There's a type 1, they're called block management areas. Don't ask me why they call them that. And there's similar programs in every state, right? Michigan's got hunter access program, the HAP. It's the same type of thing. But a type 1 block management, there's usually a sign-in box. It'll be a little wood box, looks like a mailbox, and you sign on a ticket, your name and your license plate, some other stuff. Put your ticket in the box, and then you have access to hunt that. And there's some restrictions, so read the book. I had to yell at some out-of-state guys this year, but there's some of them have special restrictions, and there's a block management book or the website you have to look at. But then there's another one, type 2, and a type 2 you have to call and get a reservation because they cap the amount of hunters that are on it. So I had talked to the biologist this year in the region that I normally elk hunt, and they said, oh, early season, this one's good, but once there's some pressure, the elk get pushed out of there. And so if you're going to go, reserve early. Okay, so you got to reserve these things a couple weeks in advance. So I reserved, and then opening weekend comes, it's 95 degrees, and I hiked out like 5 miles. It's probably the most miserable hunt I've ever done. Didn't see an elk. And circling back to something you said, when you're elk hunting, you're not elk hunting until you find the elk. I tried 6 different properties this year before I finally got into some elk. And when I got into them, it was like you said, I was several miles from the nearest parking area, and I put on a lot of miles. I got a Garmin watch, and from the first weekend of elk season to about October 12th, I think our season ended the 15th this year, but I hunted till the 12th, and I had 230 miles on this year on boots. So covered a lot of ground and was in elk a lot, but just the archery elk hunting stuff wasn't able to seal the deal.
You either need to get on someone else's podcast where they can interview you, but you've had some really cool hunts in the last few years since you've been out in Montana. I mean, even this year, the pictures you were sending me, and I know you missed a few elk, but you had some incredible hunts.
Unreal stuff this year. I got some of it on video. I haven't released a video yet, and I thought about it. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to hold on to that footage, because if and when, and I hope it's next year or whenever I draw this tag again, the area I was hunting was a draw tag, I'd like to put it all together like a couple year quest. And yeah, but I got some really cool footage of bugling bulls and shooting at some elk this year, and just some crazy stuff happened. I had a great year.
The action that you've had, and it's not like you didn't fill some tags this year. I mean, you get a mule deer?
No, I didn't actually. So
that was your buddy.
Yeah, that my buddy got a really nice one. My buddy,
that was a nice buck.
Yeah, and it was a little unfortunate because we did a pretty decent video last year, and we were hoping to film again this year. So I had 2 friends out this year. Then I was hunting with my one buddy, and the other buddy was solo because he's been out several times now and killed a couple nice deer. So he was by himself, and he ended up shooting that. So I wasn't with him to film it. But yeah, that we thought when he first shot it, we were like, oh, that's probably like a upper 140s, maybe low 150s. And we started looking at it and kind of like thinking about the deer we shot, and they were like, oh, it's probably mid to maybe upper 150s. Well, long story short, when we finally got around to scoring it, it was almost 170 inches. It's like 168 and some change.
Wow.
Yeah. And about everything you'd want on a mule deer except being real wide. It was pretty standard width, but really, really deep forks, really good main beams, really good mass. Had 2 extra points. It was a 7x5. So super cool deer. But I kept looking for something nice. Like I wanted to shoot something over 150, and I passed probably 10 different 4x4s, but the biggest buck I saw was maybe 140. It was a cool deer. Had uh had a couple extra stickers off. So I got this whitetail buck here that's got some stickers off the G2. Kind of looked like the mule deer version of that, but 4x4. But I don't know. I gambled till the end, Lou, and I busted.
You know what? That's everybody's personal choice, right? Like
Yeah.
when I go out west, I usually haul a freezer, and I'm ready to pull the trigger, and I'll deal with the repercussions. Like on my 2018 Colorado elk hunt, it was muzzleloader, do it yourself. I did have a place to stay, and the guy said, "You can just run up my back road here." And so after our introductions and I got settled in, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I drove up and I got out of the truck and I almost stepped in bear crap. Stepped out of the truck and right there, a big old pile of bear crap. So now you're kind of on edge. I mean, fresh too. So I'm like, all right, so there's bear around. So I get going up the draw. I got all loaded up, going up the draw, and I hear something rustling 20 minutes from the truck. Well, and I'm in this steep, and it was rustling just on the other side, but it was in the draw. So it's got your attention, but you're thinking bear, right? 20
Yeah.
minutes ago, you almost stepped in bear poop, and you're kind of walking a game trail. So cow elk jumps up. I had either sex. I could shoot a bull or a cow with that muzzleloader tag I had. And everybody said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know. I'll have to wait till I get out there." Matters what mood I'm in. Some days I'm willing to pull the trigger more than others. So 20 minutes into the hunt, I blow a cloud of smoke and I miss this cow elk. Still can't believe it. I looked almost every day for like 3-4 days. I just kept going around there looking. And after you get 3-4 days, you're thinking it's no good, but you just keep looking like, how did I miss that?
Yeah.
But anyway, when the smoke cleared and I missed that cow, up stood this big old beautiful bull.
Oh no. Yeah, it's pretty
And I'm
tough on a
standing there with an empty
muzzleloader hunt too.
muzzleloader, smoke clearing, like,
Yeah.
well. So there's some truth to that patience thing, but I've never been very good at it.
Yeah.
I'm more a tag filling. Take the freezer, fill the freezer. So if you pass a 140, that's what you were looking for bigger. Me, I'd rather have the meat.
And I've been all over the map. The first year I was here, I shot a 2-year-old mule deer with my bow because it was a fun hunt, and I shot it off the ground from on inside of 10 yards. So yeah, different year, different tag. It's kind of like the crossbow thing, right? It's legal, it's your tag, do what you want. And I'm not judging people that shot. It was a tough year for mature deer too, and that's something I think a lot of people are aware of out west. Wyoming and Colorado got it worse than Montana did, but Montana had a long late winter, and the deer numbers this year were way down. And it seemed like, and I think this is the thing that happens with like the breeding age bucks, so the 3, 4, 5-year-old and older bucks, those are the ones that are really getting run down in the rut because they're the ones that are competing, they're the ones that are fighting. And I saw a lot of 2 and 3-year-old bucks this year, and hardly anything older than that. The buck my buddy shot, and then we saw one other buck, but it was a 3x3. I didn't want to shoot it, but that deer was probably 4 years old. The older age class bucks were just really, really few and far between this year.
And older age class bucks are always less than younger age class bucks, numbers wise, primarily.
Yeah, great
they're
point.
balanced properly.
Yeah.
But you just said something, and I want to make a point that, and I have no problem with trophy hunting. I mean, I respect people that can hold out and go for trophy animals. But for the most of us, we have hunting season to harvest the surplus. And I'm not using the word harvest because I'm afraid to say kill, but I'm just speaking in generalities. The hunting season is to kill animals before they die of starvation. They're a renewable resource. And so when you start talking about that, it's like, that's why sometimes if you're to that level where you're chasing bigger and better, and I know I respect you as a hunter, and I have no problem with you being a trophy hunter, anybody being a trophy hunter, but some of these young guys, they get caught up in watching stuff and watching guys, and they want to be a badass hunter. And they want so much that their picture of them being a badass that they're unwilling to help manage the resource. And then Mother Nature does a kill off, and then what do we have? And they could have honed some skill by killing animals. The only way you gain experience is by killing. If you had to eat what you kill, you wouldn't survive. The eagle doesn't just prey on trophy rabbits, right?
Yeah.
And I like to bring a little bit of conservation and balance and resource management into these conversations because I'm not a trophy hunter and I don't have those tips and ideas to offer. You can go watch the Dan Infalt stuff with you and others to go get all that. But I mean, hunting has a reason, and it's not for taxidermists to make money.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And I think for me personally, and the reason I think is different for everybody, that's the great thing about hunting. It's super individual. And like I said, as long as you're operating within the laws, I don't care what anybody else does. And I've shot growing up in Michigan. Trust me, I shot plenty of year-old, 2-year-old deer because that's what there is to shoot almost exclusively. Now we talked about, yeah, down south, there's some better hunting for some older age class and larger rack bucks, but you get into 1 and 2 especially, and it's pretty tough sledding for big bucks. So I'm not judging anybody there. But yeah, but getting back to your point, and the point I was trying to make is I learned a lot hunting those deer. I learned, when to draw my bow or whatever, a lot of track jobs. You learn so much from that. And I've said it a million times. I'll say it one more. There's no replacement for experience. And you don't want to cut your teeth on the biggest buck of your life. That's a recipe for disaster. I mean, it can work out, but you're more than likely you're going to learn some real tough lessons if that's the case.
Agree.
Yeah. Well, Lou, we're running up an hour here. I don't want to keep you all night, but I got 1 or 2 more questions for you. So we mentioned we had Chris Leppert on the Hunting Bees live show last night, and he talked about the Mobile Hunters Expo, which I had heard of it, but I didn't really know what it was. So I learned a lot more about that. And I think you went to the Kalamazoo show last year. Is that right?
That is correct. I did.
Yeah. So he talked about some of the dates. Sounds like they're going back to Kalamazoo. So 1, are you going to that show? 2, are you going to any of the other shows? I think he said he had one down south and one in Pennsylvania.
I would love to be able to do all 3 shows. I'm probably going to do the Kalamazoo. I'll do at least one. It's just that time of year. That's our busy season, unless things change.
Sure.
I mean, it's so easy for me to do Kalamazoo. I would love to go do a show in Pennsylvania. We do a lot of business in Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania, Michigan, I'll probably be at. If I get lucky, I'll try and hit that Southern show. But I thought it was phenomenal. I didn't go in there with high expectations because it was a newer show. He's a newer promoter. But when I got there, immediately, well, I mean, maybe you know this, but I do a lot of business with, I do a lot of wholesaling to other companies, manufacturers in the mobile hunting market, right?
Yep.
So they're all there. So it's like all my customers are there. And then when they put that, somebody was telling me there was less than 1,000 people at that show. I still struggle to believe that because that Saturday was one of the busiest. So it was, I think, Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday morning. Saturdays at any show, if you do a weekend show, a consumer show, Saturdays are always what I call big money Saturday. That's busy time. Friday night's usually date night, and Sundays wind down and get out of there. But it was an incredible experience. I mean, honest to God, I never did more business, not by far, because I've done some very big shows, but I did more business at that show than I've ever done at a show that had 10 times the people through there because they put our audience in front of us.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Smaller audience, but it's the exact target audience. I mean, maybe, and not to get into business, and that's not why we're talking about this, but just to make a point, if you got 10,000 people at your regular outdoor show, you might have 5 or 10% maybe conversion. But when you got your target audience and the people that use the products, that know who you are, that know the reputation, the Stealth Outdoors, and you got them in one venue, then obviously it's going to be better for your conversion rate.
It was an incredible show. It was beyond my expectations. Kalamazoo, you heard Dan kind of talk about it last night. I think he saw somebody either getting robbed at a gas station or pulled. What was that part? I forget.
Yeah, I think he talked about his room coming with a girl. I think he said.
Oh,
yeah.
He had some nightmare stories about his hotel room. Ours wasn't great, but I, I think they picked Kalamazoo because they found a host site big enough to do it. I haven't spent a lot of time. I used to travel all over Michigan back in my environmental days, and I thought I stayed in every town. And I could have swore I'd stayed in Kalamazoo before, but it didn't seem like I remembered it. But I would do the show again. I had no problems with it. They were even talking about camping out there. That was pretty cool. Some guys were camping. And you even mentioned that you might even be thinking about coming back. It was the mobile hunting market. I mean, how could I not go? Really, I'm half tempted to not exhibit at any of them and go visit all three, because I've got dealers at all these shows. Some, a lot of our customers are equipment manufacturers. They'll be selling our stuff. I don't even have to go set up a booth. I should go visit all three just to talk to people and enjoy it.
Yeah, it sounded like something cool. And for people that might have missed Dan's show that listen to my podcast, just want to bring it up. So it was an interesting thing. And I mean, I like and I haven't been to as many, especially since COVID, but that's why I talked about maybe getting back, because I used to like to travel. I got a friend that was in the industry doing food plot seed. I went to a few shows with him, and yeah, it's a good environment. It's a good place to meet people. I like to see what are the new products. You learn a lot, and I know they had some speakers talking about, or Chris had, like Dan talking about, tactics and techniques, new equipment. So it's a great place with a lot of like-minded people and a good experience.
Well, and the thing about a show is, and I don't want to waste too much time on this, but when you're a small business, and so we're running a shop here, and then when you go do a consumer show, you're running your store there. So you're getting ready all week for it. Then you're traveling to it. Then you're working all weekend, and then you're traveling back. And it's it just spreads you so thin. So I think they're gonna, like Dan said last night, they're bam, 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 like 3 weeks in a row or 3 weeks in a month.
Yeah,
that's impossible for a small company. If you're a bigger company and you got 10, 20 people, 3 guys go do this show and 3 guys go do that show and 3 guys go do that show. But for me to do those 3 shows, there's just no way.
Yeah.
But I got to give that some thought. Maybe I won't exhibit at any of them and just go to all 3.
Well, you got to exhibit at Kalamazoo, right? That's the home turf.
Probably.
Well, hey, Lou, we've been meaning to do this for a while, so I want to say thanks for your time. You had a lot of good stories. You're a great storyteller, and that always makes for a good podcast. So appreciate you coming on. Before we wrap up, I think a lot of people know already, but it never hurts to say again, where can people find, if they want to shop some Stealth Outdoors products, where can they find you? And not only your website, where's your social media is at?
StealthOutdoors.com is the website, and social media, we should get better on it, but all the tabs to social media are at the bottom of the page.
Okay.
But it's Stealth Outdoors. I think there's a hyphen on one, and there might be a one. Facebook, Instagram. We do have a YouTube channel with some tutorials. But we haven't done, ever since Gabby left, we haven't done a new tutorial in a while. I take that back. Nicole did some filming for us, but we got to get back on that. I found a young guy here locally recently that we're going to try and get some better content going. We've just been cutting and shipping and cutting deals. We got, I know you're wanting to wrap up, but we've got some new patterns coming up for the next year. We're going to ATA. There's a collab project with one of our product partners coming up. A lot of exciting things that'll be announced in the near future. So feel free to check out our Facebook and Instagram, or keep an eye. If you sign up for our email alerts, we do new product announcements, which is once, twice a year on our email blast is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Or if we have a sale, and if it's going to say in the subject line, Stealth Outdoors having a 20% off sale or 25% off. You don't even have to click it, but we don't spam people. We don't go nuts on that stuff because we don't like being treated like that. So we don't do that.
Yeah. Some of those companies are out of hand where you get 3 emails a day. So it's good when you're putting out a wide email like that you're giving some value. So that's good to hear. So sign up for Stealth Outdoors email list. And then hopefully, I know when you're a small, lean shop that it's hard to wear all the hats, but yeah, it's hopefully you can keep up on the social media too. It sounds like you got some things in the works to look forward to in 2024.
There's a lot going on right now. So yeah, keep an eye out. We got some new patterns coming. Some of them, the deals aren't inked yet, but it's very likely to happen. I mean, we're close to production on it, and something just popped up the other day with one of our product partners. They're trying to get us back in someone who blew us off a while ago. So I'm just going to leave that as a tease. There might be a 4th new pattern coming up, but we'll
awesome.
see.
Well, hey, thanks again for your time, Lou, and best of luck to you in 2024.
Thank you, Jeremy. You keep it up out there. I love the whole going for broke thing. I'm glad you went out there because I love it out west.
All right. Thanks, Lou. We'll catch you later.
All right. Thanks. Bye.